Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome. Welcome to Inside Al Snow's Head.
Where's your
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another trip inside Al Snow's head. I'm Jared Orr, lucky enough to be riding shotgun again, and the man behind the wheel driving this machine, Al Snow. Al, how you doing today, sir?
Doing good. I've just renewed my license and I'm ready to take the wheel.
Awesome. That sounds perfect because we've got a ton of people that are ready for you as well. Al, I was actually going to start us off with a joke about construction, but I'm still working on it. So,
Well, you laid the foundation there really nice, so you've got someplace to go.
That's right. Try the veal. I'll be here all week. So this is...
I know you're out there. I can hear you breathing.
That's right. Is this thing on? This is our third full episode. The first two are getting a ton of downloads every day. People are finding out about us as our fans share, which, guys, we really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Al, I want to take a second to give a special shout out to a fan, Chris Wenk, and his buddies out in Alamo Gordo, New Mexico, who have been talking about how much they love the show. They've been spreading the word big time. Chris is a huge Al Snow fan, and I really appreciate everything that he's been doing. And I don't think fans actually realize how much that still means to you even today.
It means everything to me. If it's not for the fans, I wouldn't have been able to have a career like I've had. The fans are absolutely everything. They are what drives, the wrestling business. It's very much a symbiotic relationship between the fans and the wrestlers. It doesn't mean that I always agree with some of the more vocal minority that are out there, but believe me, I appreciate and respect and value every single person who is a fan of professional wrestling. And if you ask people, I'll tell them all the time when they come up and see me out in public, or if I'm making an appearance, I'm doing a comic book convention or any number of things, they'll come up and they'll say they're either a fan of wrestling, or they are a fan of mine, or they know someone who is a fan, and I'll always say thank you very much. And I mean it sincerely, because if it were not for them, we would not get to do what we love to do so much.
One of the things that I thought was really weird in listening to some of the other interviews that you've done before is the fact that you've had to address the Al Snow doesn't like the fans rumors. And I hear interviewers bring that up and ask you about it, but I've never heard that come from the fans. There's never been anything but love and support. One of my best friends, Joe, growing up, said he met you in the Philadelphia airport and you were the nicest celebrity he ever met. Where did that come from?
I think because when I do interviews and I do, podcasts and I do seminars, when I'm speaking, I'm actually speaking to the performers. I'm not speaking to the fans. The information that I am trying to put out there, or, my viewpoint, my philosophical ideas on professional wrestling, what I was taught, I'm doing that to the performers and not to the fans. And I think that the fans take it as if I'm speaking to them, disagreeing with them, or devaluing their opinions, when what I'm trying to do is have the performers themselves, the wrestlers themselves, focus on the right things, not focusing on just a pat on the back or critical acclaim, but focusing on what the art of professional wrestling really always has been and always will be about. And that is being able to physically tell a story within the context of a competitive situation that allows the performer to take the audience on an emotional ride that builds to a culmination that is equivalent to an orgasm, that motivates them to want to pay to see that performer in greater numbers and more frequently. That, at the end of the day, is what professional wrestling is. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it is what drives the business. And unfortunately, the performers, the wrestlers themselves, focus way too much on trying to have the quote unquote best match on the show as opposed to the match that does the best business. And that's a focus that I'm trying to shift. And of course, the fans who have access to information but a limited insight and perspective assume that I am somehow taking a negative stance towards them when I'm not even having a conversation with them. I'm having it directly to the wrestlers themselves and trying to help them have the best chance of success. The way I explain it is this: everything that is done with a professional wrestler is an investment of time and money. The promoter invests his time and money in the wrestler, hoping that the wrestler will go out to the ring, create that moment, that magic, that connection with the audience that then the promoter with the wrestler together in partnership can exploit and promote and make a profit, allowing both of them to continue to do what they're doing. And then that thus entertains the fans because the fans have invested their time, money, and effort in paying to see that wrestler. And in reality, they're really paying to suspend their disbelief and be swept up in that story that's being told in that ring within the context of it being a competitive situation between two prize fighters. And the more we deviate, the more we go away from that, the very heart of what the art of professional wrestling is, then the more that the audience, the mass audience, becomes disenfranchised and no longer wants to watch on a regular basis. And that's why it's so important to reacquaint the wrestlers themselves with that. Now, the fans can like what they like and dislike what they like, and that's fine. They're in perfectly from the most well-informed fan in wrestling, which would be Dave Meltzer, down to the person who just casually watches it when he's flipping through the channels and happens to see something that interests him. They're entitled to their opinions. Every single person and their opinion is valuable. But you are the performer, you're the wrestler, and as a result, you have to make the decisions as to what works and what doesn't work for you, not what you can, because you can't please everyone. And as since wrestling is an art, it is one, subjective, but two, since it's an art, it has to be done instinctually, not intellectually. And for the performers, when they go out there and they try to intellectualize something that should be done on an instinctual level, it doesn't communicate. It doesn't engage that emotional connection with the audience to the degree that that audience is craving. And it may please certain fans, and if it does, great, that's terrific. But as a wrestler, you're trying to appeal to the largest audience possible. It's no different than if you were to produce, like Jarrett, you were to decide you wanted to produce a comic book movie. Let's say you're going to do Spider-Man or Batman or any number of characters that are established in the comic book genre. There's an audience that knows those characters, knows them well, knows their backstory, knows their motivations, appreciates that movie for it being a comic book movie. But the movie producers, if they really want to make a profit on the movie, have to do two things. One, they have to produce a movie that appeals to that core audience, the comic book fan audience. But at the same time, they have to produce a movie that the average person who's never picked up a comic book or only casually knows of Batman or Superman or Spider-Man, but has never read or has read, but only when they were a kid and hasn't read for 20 or 30 years since a comic book, you have to make a movie that appeals to that audience because there's much more of them than there are of that core audience of the comic book reader. And if you only appeal to the comic book reader and not attempt to try to appeal to that mass audience that I call Mr. and Mrs. Walmart, because there are far more of Mr. and Mrs. Walmart in the population than there are any other segment of the population in the United States, pretty much around the world.
Of course.
Then you're going to lose money. And if you lose money, then the production companies and the studios and the bookkeepers are not going to be willing to give you more money to make more movies. And as a result, you're not going to get a chance to do the very art that you so love to do.
I agree. And I guess a lot of this is just rhetorical because there's no real answer. We'll never know to it. But I always wonder why when I share a wrestling related post on social media, I've always got the guy that's got to chime in and let me know how it's fake or not real. But when somebody shares the Jurassic Park movie trailer, nobody questions the fact that Andy from Parks and Rec is going to fight a bunch of dinosaurs and save the day at the end. Why is wrestling held to a different standard than other forms of television and entertainment?
Well, I think a lot of that has been ingrained in, from generations of fans, from way back in the day. And listen, knowing that wrestling is predetermined, not real or fake, but predetermined, that's been common knowledge for decades. And to believe otherwise is ridiculous. I tell the story all the time that when 1976, when I was 12, I had proclaimed to my family, who were all wonderful people, but none of them were Mensa candidates, and none of them were involved in professional wrestling in any manner. And every one of them laughed at me and thought it was a joke, and that I was a joke, because they were like, "Oh, why do you want to do that? It's fake." Even my grandmother, God rest her soul, was like, "Why do you want to do that? It's fake." How did they know? They weren't psychic? They weren't, like I said, genius level people. They weren't able to, they weren't ever involved in professional wrestling in any manner. How'd they know? Well, because everybody knew. I even remember a Monty Python skit from England back in the day when I was probably, again, in my early 12 or early teens, 12, 13, 14 years old, watching it on PBS at the time. That was where it aired. And it was a skit of two wrestlers that were in the ring, and they were acting all aggressive, and they'd lock up. And as soon as they'd lock up, then all of a sudden he'd go, "Oh, hello, Albert, how are you?" And "Oh, I'm fine, Reginald, how are you?" And then he'd grab him in a headlock, and he'd growl and try to rip his head off. And then he'd go, "Are you coming over for tea?" And then he'd take him over in a headlock, take over. And then they'd struggle a little bit. And then the other wrestler would go, "Well, certainly, my wife, can I bring my wife?" And then they'd chat in every hold. And they were making a joke about the fact that wrestling was not a real competitive situation. How did they know? Because everybody knew. The only difference between then and now is that the performers themselves never indulged in allowing the audience, basically never stopped selling the finish, the outcome. The audience wanted to believe that it was real, that the win and loss had some gravity to it, some consequence to it, and the performers never went out of their way to allow that not to be the case.
So you got guys like Joey Ryan who are making a killing out on the indie circuit and is over like crazy, and he flips people with his dick.
Yeah.
You always talk about trying to, make it a real competition. And how do you feel about things like the dick flip?
To be quite honest, the number one rule in wrestling is if it sells tickets, do it. The number two rule in wrestling is that you can do absolutely anything you want to do as long as you do it within that correct context. Now, I don't know how I've not watched it, so I don't know how he does it or when or why he does it in the ring. He may be doing it to appeal to that smaller, hardcore wrestling audience, and if he's successful with it, so be it. It might be difficult for him to sell that on a larger platform to a more mass audience, but if he's successful and he's making money, good for him. You're asking that question of a man who has made a very good living and a very lengthy career out of making people believe that I can knock another human being unconscious with a plastic head. Now, take it from me, Jarrett. I can't knock anyone unconscious. I can't even knock a toddler out with that thing. And I've tried. They just simply fall down and start crying, and then the parents, look at you accusingly. But I can't knock anyone out. And and if you really want to get into it, how ridiculous is it to shoot another person off in the ropes? How ridiculous is it to jump off the top rope? How ridiculous is it within a context of a real situation, competitive situation, that you dive out of the ring? I'm fine with any and all of that as long as you paint that picture in your body of the match that I don't at no point in time go, well, why did that just happen? What are they doing? Why is that going on? I don't get it. Because the second that I do that and I don't understand, it's like you're reading a book and it just doesn't make any sense. Or you're watching a movie. It's a Western, and then all of a sudden it turns into a murder mystery or a horror film, or, it completely shifts genres. As long as you paint the picture and it makes sense to everyone in that building, not just you and your opponent, you do whatever you want.
Well, the move is over, like I said, big time. There's YouTube videos, people
Sure.
watch it. Cody Rhodes is taking it. Everybody pretty much that he gets in the ring with takes it. People love it. The fans love it. The fans that hate it, they still talk about it all over the place. So that's equally as good for him.
Yeah, they're still putting it over.
That's
They're
right.
still, they're still putting it over and bringing attention to it.
So if you guys are booked on a show and a promoter's got you in there, and Joey Ryan tells you that he wants you to take the dick flip bump, are you going to take it?
Sure, why not?
All right, so it would sound
If it's there and it's the right thing to do at the right time, absolutely, I'll do it.
All right, so, without getting too much into it, you guys sit down before the match. You let him know that you're going to come in. You're going to get him in the corner, wear him out with some head, and then once he gets his feet back, he's going to flip you with his dick.
I don't know. Maybe.
I'm just hey, you guys could be onto something there.
Yeah, you might be onto something. I don't know. I have no idea. I mean,
The fans,
you know,
the fans love it, and like I said, it's just one of the things that it's a question that popped up a few times, and I thought to myself, people asked about it. I've heard you talk about it, and just like
Yeah.
you said, there's a bunch of different things. I've heard you compare things like that to the people's elbow, which is also a ridiculous
Yeah.
move in the past.
the worm.
Yeah.
The worm. Scotty Too Hotty. What was the most dangerous, the most devastating move in all of wrestling was not. It was not a pile driver. It was not a DDT. It was Scotty Too Hotty's bulldog.
Yeah.
Because the guy laid there for 45 seconds.
Yeah.
It only takes 3 seconds to pin him. But hey, nobody said a word.
No, he had to.
And to be honest, when The Rock first started doing the people's elbow, there were a lot of the boys in the back that were poo-pooing that. They were down in it and thinking it was ridiculous and comical and he shouldn't be doing it. And he got it over. He got it established and got it over on the crowd to where the crowd bought into it.
There wasn't a kid in my high school who wasn't giving the people's elbow to other kids on the wrestling mats in gym class.
Of course.
It was one of the biggest things I've ever seen. So, Al, we've had a ton of feedback actually through the first two shows. A lot of good stuff. People have seemed to really enjoy it. Most of it's been really solid. I've actually heard from some other podcasters who said that I maybe should consider engaging you a little bit more. We've heard from some fans who said they wish that I would shut up so you could talk a little more. And we've heard about people, they want to know a little bit about some early Al Snow and hear a little bit more about you. And I plan on doing all that today, damn it, because we're here to please the fans. So I'm going to somehow engage you more while talking less, all while we find out a little bit more about how you grew to be this lovable figure that you are today. But again, coming off of a busy week for the Snow brand, you were a guest on Why It Ended with Matt Kuhn and Robbie E this week. So if you guys can check that out, I listened to it. I laughed out loud when Robbie told you that he had a 5-pound Chihuahua named Prancer, and you responded with, "Yeah, I know you do." I laughed out loud. You guys seemed like you had a lot of fun. So guys, check out Why It Ended with Matt Kuhn and Robbie E. Our second show dropped and got a ton of action. A lot of people really seemed to enjoy that. You had 2 big shows for OVW. You did a TV taping. You guys had another event on Saturday, correct?
Yes, we did. We had another event in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and I'll be going down tomorrow to the Davis Arena, and we'll be doing yet another TV taping. We're working our way closer to that 1,000th episode.
That is so awesome. And I noticed that Collar and Elbow brand has a t-shirt giveaway right now. They've got this picture posted. Guys, do yourself a favor and check out collarandelbowbrand.com. Check them out on Facebook or Twitter, because right now, with every purchase, you guys will be eligible to win this t-shirt that has been autographed by some of the biggest names in wrestling over the last 20 and 30 years. I don't even want to, I mean, there's guys like the Rock and Roll Express, D'Lo Brown, Just Incredible. I feel bad. There's a ton of names on there. I don't want to leave anybody out. I don't have the picture up in front of me, but with every purchase at collarandelbowbrand.com from now through the end of May, someone's going to win that t-shirt, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah. We also have the military t-shirts up, the military inspired t-shirts, and a portion of the proceeds go to benefit the American Legion, which is an awesome charitable organization that helps our men and women who served in the armed forces in a myriad of ways. I did not know, nor did I appreciate just how much the American Legion does for our veterans until we started doing this.
Well, there's been a ton of outreach for you, both from people that have bought the shirt and loved it, and from military, personnel that have thanked you for just doing that. So that's something that's really been awesome and really cool to do. And I understand that on the autographed T-shirt, that the winner does have the option to have that signed by Rod Hicks before it gets mailed out. Correct?
Yeah, yeah. You got to put the Loverboy Brock Landers. It's not complete without Loverboy Brock Landers
All right.
autograph.
All right, good. I was just making sure. So, it seems like a lot of people really want to get to know a little bit more about you, Al. As crazy as that may sound. So, like I
It
said,
is crazy.
I'm gonna do my best to find out a little bit about you. And I told him that I was gonna dig in. So I guess we're just gonna go ahead and take it right from the top. 55 years ago, your dad took your mom out to the nicest joint in Lima, Ohio. Take it away, Al.
Yep. It was a drive-in movie theater, and next thing you know, ta-da!
So where is Lima, Ohio?
Lima, Ohio is on I-75. It is just an hour north of Dayton, Ohio, and an hour south of Toledo, Ohio, up on the northwest side of Ohio. It is the home of Phyllis Diller and Hugh Downs, who at the time were probably some of the most famous former residents, but I knew given time, they would eventually pass away. I would outlive them, and thus I would become one of Lima's most famous residents. So
That's incredible, and of course you are. Is there a sign like when we break into Lima? Is it the home of Al Snow?
no, not yet. I'm petitioning. At one point in time, maybe if I'd have won my bid for mayor, I could have had a sign put up. And actually, I ran for mayor kind of by an accident. I started it as a bit of a joke. My platform was that I actually had more personality than the incumbent. So anytime that I was on any public forum, radio or television, I would proclaim my candidacy and that I was a write-in candidate for mayor, and ended up the night of the election getting so many write-in votes that I thought there for a second I was going to win. I was like crapping my pants. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do because I'm not a mayor. So I didn't even live I lived just on the other side of the street of the city limits. So I couldn't have served.
Man, that would have just been incredible. This crazy thing really isn't a work, is it?
No, I do a lot of stuff that really I do just to entertain myself. I have a completely different viewpoint on life in general than most people do.
So what was a young life like for Al Snow? What were some of the things that you're into? Now, you just told us when you were 12, you knew you were going to be a professional wrestler. So other than professional wrestling, what was Al Snow doing? Did you play sports? What was your deal?
Well, back in the day, I played football in junior high. I was a guard and tackle. Basically, I guarded the water can and tackled anybody that came near it. I spent the whole season riding the bench, never actually got to play a game, and then got involved in martial arts, did some martial arts training, and then was a big, nobody's going to believe this, but I was a big skateboarder, rode skateboard everywhere. I mean, everywhere. There was no place that was too far to ride that skateboard to. Never, that was my main means of transportation was riding that skateboard.
Now, you had mentioned in the last episode that your best friend was African American, and you go there and hang out. A lot of the guys started with the snow and snowman, and that's where the Al Snow came from. So you're telling me that you were rolling up in there, mullet flapping on your skateboard, rolling into the hood to go hang out with your best friend?
Yeah, and I didn't have a mullet at that time. The mullet came later when
Okay.
it came into vogue.
Right.
At that time, I was just wearing, I was sporting the mushroom head. The hair was so thick and so prolific that it just got, it would just go take a life of its own, and just got a full mushroom bloom up there on top of the head.
So you leave home at 18 and you go to start your quest to become a professional wrestler, correct?
I started that quest to become a professional wrestler back when I was 14 years old. I would ride the old skateboard all the way down. This was at a time, and I know that a lot of people out there listening probably don't know that this time actually existed. This was prior to this was what we call the dark ages, kids. This was prior to the internet. This was prior to cell phones. This was prior to cable television, even. Where I would have to get on my skateboard, ride to the public library, or I would ride down to first I would ride down to the pharmacy, because that was where you bought your comic books and your magazines, and they had the wrestling magazines there. Buy the wrestling magazines, and they would have in there, you'd find out information about where the promotional offices were located at, like the Crockett's were in Charlotte, North Carolina. Vern Gagne was out in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so on and so on and so on. And so then I would ride that skateboard down to the public library. I would go in. They would have phone books for the major cities, the yellow pages. And I'd go through and I'd find the phone numbers for all those offices in all those different cities. And then I'd ride back home. And this was back when phone calls were actual long distance. You got charged for calling outside of your town. And I would get on the phone and I would call Jim Crockett Promotions, or I'd call AWA, Vern Gagne, or I'd call Dick Afflis, Dick the Bruiser in Indianapolis, or I would call Ed Farhat up in Detroit, the original Sheik, George Cannon over in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Boy, that was an expensive phone call back then.
What do one of those phone calls? What do one of those phone calls sound like? 14 years old, Al Snow is calling.
Yep.
They pick up. You say what?
Hey, hello, sir. I want to be a professional wrestler, and I was wondering if, and they'd immediately start trying to shut me down. And I'd be, what I want to do is I want to get trained, and I know I need to be trained, and I need somebody to train me. Could you train me? No, kid, leave me alone. Click. And then I'd call at least once every 1 month, 2 to 3 months. I would make the phone calls. And they'd get to where they knew my name and they would know my voice. And sometimes they'd give me the runaround or they'd set the phone down and leave me waiting for them until I'd finally give up and hang up. And then, that was how I was finally, I was 17 years old and I was graduating high school, and that was how I ended up, I've told this story numerous times, but I ended up meeting Jim Lancaster because one of the DECA, the distributive education class, decided to run a fundraiser, and they brought in Dick the Bruiser's company from Indianapolis for a fundraiser, made contact with Jim Lancaster, who performed on the show. He, of course, turned me down, tried to send me up to Al Costello, who was one of the Fabulous Kangaroos. But at that same time, I had gotten a hold of Gene Anderson in the Crockett's office. He had told me about some tryouts that were being held that October, and I was on my way. I was going down. I was going to pay him $250 to try out and basically get my ass whipped and sent back home.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes. I have an older brother, who's 1 year older. My sister was 4 years older. She's passed away from leukemia. I have a brother that is 2 years younger, a brother that's 3 years younger, and a brother that's 13 years younger.
Wow. Um, so what did they think as you were going off to be a wrestler and they were going to have, regular jobs?
I, you know, um, I don't know. They never really talked to me about it. I don't think they took it seriously because basically I'm the only one in my family that kind of ran away with the circus. Everyone else is very, hard workers, very successful. All, they've all, a lot of tradesmen, a lot of blue collar workers, a lot of, but all, and have all done very well for themselves. But no one that actually went, quote unquote, ran away with the circus and went and did something so different, so unique. And it was not like they were, um, not supportive, but they certainly didn't take it seriously. They made a lot of jokes about it at the reunions and family get togethers and things like that, and did so for years.
And and that's what I was wondering. Ron White, one of my favorite comedians, has a spot where he talks about being a comedian. He says, I'm a stand-up comedian, and I have a brother who's a doctor. I have a sister who's a lawyer, and I hate Thanksgiving. And
Yeah.
and that's I always.
Oh, I used to hate family get-togethers, man, because it was always jokes and wisecracks about what I was doing, and the fact that it was fake, and and everybody made fun of it and made fun of me.
And that was, of course, until you actually, became famous, and that's when, everybody knew you could do it all along, right?
Yeah, of course, and and famous meaning that people saw me on TV, and that then henceforth I was a celebrity, and not just TV in a regional way, but a TV on a national level. Well, now I was a celebrity, so of course now I was successful, and everybody's like, oh yeah, that's my brother, that's my cousin, that's my nephew, that's my, I went to high school with him. That all changed. That all became. And now it wasn't a joke anymore. It was. I was always there. I always supported him, and they, they did in their own way, I guess. But I always give people the advice that if you're looking for someone to support you in doing something that they never have done or no one else has, be prepared to do it on your own. Be alone and be prepared to be alone. You've got to make that decision that you're going to do it no matter what other people think of you.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm going to take away from today's episode for sure is the fact that you said that you thought you were successful, right away because you were making a living and you were doing something that you loved, and it didn't really matter to you when anyone else thought you were successful. You were successful from the jump, so it had to kind of catch you off guard when people started, really gloating over the success because it was nothing new to you. You were still just doing what you love to do.
True, and I guess that viewpoint it helped, but at the same time, I don't know, it kind of hinders you in the wrestling business because my objective was never to be a star. My objective was to be a professional wrestler, to do what I love to do. That mindset caused me to miss maybe some opportunities that other or not capitalize on those opportunities as much as I probably could have and should have if I'd have been more focused on wanting to be a star as opposed to just being thrilled and happy that I was getting to do the thing that I love to do. So you gotta know. Yeah, I tell guys all the time. They say the secret to success is not hard work, because if that were the case, there are women in Africa that got to walk. They got to get up in the morning and walk 12 miles one direction just to get a bucket of water so that they have something to drink and 12 miles back. And if that's the case, as hard as they work just to survive, they should be driving Ferraris and Porsches and Lamborghinis, and they're not. The secret to success is not just hard work; it's knowing where to put that hard work and knowing where to focus, and so that you can get results from that hard work and that effort. Doesn't mean that you don't grind, that you don't get out there and push every day, but you got to know where to push and why to push there to get what you want.
No, I know you were super thankful to be doing what you were doing, and some of the names that you'd mentioned that you were working with, the Von Erichs and Herculeses and Austin Idols, and the names just go on. Was there ever a time in the '80s when you said to yourself, "I've had enough of the territories and the Monaco. I'm ready for Crockett Promotions. I'm ready for New York." Did that time ever come, or were you really just enjoying what you were doing and how it was going, and knowing that it was going to happen in time?
No, when I got to about started getting into the, 10, 11, 12 years, and I was still known as the best kept secret in wrestling, that's a great compliment year one, year two, year three. But about year 10 or 12, you want people to start telling the secret. And, it it started getting frustrating and it started getting disheartening. But those moments where I'd get frustrated, I'd get disheartened. Um, you know, it would I'd have a night where things just went right, and man, like I said earlier, when it all clicks and it all falls together, man, nothing makes you feel more alive. It's just so awesome, and then you'd be right back in it again. You'd be right back in the thick of wanting to do it and never giving up, and just wanting to do it till the day you died, and then you'd start to get frustrated and disappointed and be contemplating taking up bowling for a living.
Was there ever a backup plan? What was Al Snow's backup plan?
No, there was never a backup plan. Yeah, I made the conscious decision. I made the choice that I wanted to be a professional wrestler, and I was going to do whatever it took to do that. And I didn't stop. Just kept going and going and going and then kept doing and doing and doing, in spite of how many people told me that it was a joke, or that I was quote unquote not successful in their eyes. I loved what I was doing, and I made the decision that that was what I wanted to do, and I was going to do it.
So there was never a plan B. You were just going to go be a plumber with Uncle George. If this didn't work out, you knew you were going to be in wrestling and you were going to make it into one of those big promotions.
But no, you got to understand now that these days, when you say, I knew I was going to make it into one of those promotions, that wasn't the mindset. I know that today, when guys get into the wrestling business, the idea is I'm going to make it to WWE. Maybe even 10 or 15 years ago, it was I'm going to get into WWE, or I'm going to get into WCW, or I'm going to get into WWE or WCW or ECW. That wasn't the case. It was when I got in, it was I want to get in and I want to be a professional wrestler. I didn't, there was no objective of, oh, okay, I want to get to just wrestle for WWA, which was, or AWA, or I can't wait, I'm going to go wrestle for NWA and just for the Crockett's promotion. Or, you never thought that way. The way you thought was, I want to get and become a professional wrestler. And the idea of going just to one particular territory at that time, you just didn't have that mindset. The mindset was, I want to go and I want to be a professional wrestler, and I want to be successful. And successful means that the goals that I had when I started that I would equate to success were that I got to do what I wanted to do for a living. I got to have matches that people would remember, that I'd make some kind of emotional impact where people would walk up and, hey, I remember you did this or did that. I would make money. I'd make a good living at doing what I love to do. And I'd be able to create a name that lasted longer than just my time in the wrestling business. Those were my three goals. And I think I've kind of done that.
You've certainly absolutely done that. And here you are on the 36th anniversary of the day you broke in. In fact, it was probably right about now you were getting tossed out of that battle royal, almost to the minute, I would imagine, right? Battle royal.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe might have been. I don't know.
That's pretty awesome, and here you are, still got so much going on and so many fans that still enjoy you. We're gonna get into the ECW and the Smoky Mountain and the WWE and the TNA. We've got a long haul here and a lot of episodes that we're gonna do. So today, I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the time that you spent in the territories, coming up and getting ready to be the Al Snow that we all ran into and fell in love with. What would be your biggest takeaway from your time in the territories? From that gap from '82 to in 1995 when Al Snow rocked the world with that match in ECW. What would be your biggest takeaway from that period?
The territories lasted till about really, truly, they started dying off in '84, and that was simply because Vince started hiring away all of the workers out of the territories and leaving the territories with nothing but wrestlers. That caused that shift, and then they became outlaws, and outlaws were the ones that were not affiliated with, say, the NWA or any televised promotion. And what I would take away from it is just, I guess, God, it was so much fun. It just was such a awesome time to go out there and to get to do it. I don't know. I mean, again, we mentioned it. I mentioned it before. I mean, there's not been one time in 36 years that I've regretted being a professional wrestler. And there's not one time that I have ever thought to myself, I shouldn't have done this. Um, there were times I got disappointed, I got frustrated, and most of that would be because of the fact that I pointed the finger at everyone but myself. The minute that I started to point that finger back at myself and accept responsibility, I was able to take control of the one person that mattered, which was me, and I was able to then effect changes that helped to eliminate that frustration, disappointment, and aggravation. And but at no point in time did I ever consider that I would be happier doing something else, no matter how frustrated or disappointed or uh, uh, just upset that I would get. At no point in time did I ever consider that, you made a mistake. You should never have done this. You know, you should have went and you know, been a magician for the blind, or you know, uh, you know,
Anything
trained
else?
seeing eye little anything else. You did porn for the blind. I'm exceptional at that. But I never once have ever thought that way. Never considered it. I've been blessed. I really, when I say that, I've been blessed to get to do what I love to do for as long as I've gotten to do it. And you know, um, I've made plenty of mistakes, screwed up many an opportunity. Um, you know, uh, could have made more of my career and done bigger things if I had known then what I know now. But um, making those mistakes has allowed me to be able to communicate those experiences to young and up and coming prospective talent and let them learn from that experience and those mistakes, and hoping that they will then avoid those same pitfalls and be able to better take advantage of the platform that they now have, that's much greater and grander in scale than any of the ones that any of us wrestlers performed on before.
Well, as a wrestling fan, I certainly appreciate the fact that you stuck it out and didn't ever consider doing anything else because certainly had years of entertainment watching you out there perform, both in the ring and out of the ring, of course. And again, we're going to get into all the stuff that you did later in your career, so I don't want anyone to get all upset and say, "Hey, you didn't talk about the matches with Rob Van Dam, and you didn't." We're going to get to all of that stuff as well. One thing that I do have that gets brought up every once in a while, and we'll probably do a good portion of an episode on this as well, but it happened early on. How does Al Snow meet Dan Severn?
I met Dan Severin through former partner of mine, Dennis Kaspowitz. Dennis Kaspowitz was a former AAU amateur champion. He was a player coach for the U.S. Olympic wrestling team, and there were a lot of exceptional shooters and hookers in the business back then, especially for whatever reason around Michigan and Ohio. There were a lot of amateur wrestlers, former shooters that were becoming involved in professional wrestling. And I had to open school, and Dan Severin was interested in being trained as a professional wrestler and made the connection with me through Dennis Kaspowitz. And met Dan, and we began training because at that time there was the company, the UWFI in Japan, which was worked shoot fights. It was kind of like a precursor to what today's MMA is style wise. And, it was where a group of Japanese professional wrestlers had declared that professional wrestling as we knew it was basically predetermined, and they no longer wanted to, be involved in it, and they wanted to be involved in a quote unquote, real professional wrestling, which was all they did was they changed the style in the ring where they didn't shoot guys off anymore. They were allowed to strike, but only with open hand strikes to the head and neck and face. They were allowed to throw, the kicks. And when they struck you, they struck you. When they kicked you, they kicked you. But they knew going in who was going to win and who was going to lose. And when they put holds on you, they didn't put them on to try to get you to submit or, hook you and try to get you to give up or try to win the match, because they knew they were not supposed to be the ones that were supposed to be winning. So they were working a wrestling match and working the audience, and they were so successful in doing so that without TV exposure, they were selling out the Tokyo Egg Dome on a regular basis. They were doing amazing business, and I knew that they would make it a point to, they would bring in gaijins, foreign wrestlers that had legitimate backgrounds, like Gary Albright was a huge star for them. I knew Dan, with his background, would be a perfect fit for that promotion, and I even told him that I thought that would be the best place for him and best opportunity for him to really be able to succeed and make good money. And so we began training, and he started working there, and then he had decided that he wanted to get involved in the UFC back in its infancy, which was completely different than what it is now. He tried to get himself booked in there, couldn't do it. And then, wonderful lady that has helped so many people out. They wouldn't have had a wrestling career if it wasn't for her. She helped me out tremendously. Sabu, the Malenkos, Jody and Dean, X-Pac, a bunch of guys. Phyllis Lee, who was associated with me in the wrestling school at that time in Lima. She contacted the UFC, got Dan booked in the UFC, talked to me. About training Dan, which was insane, because unlike now, these days, a fighter is going to fight one guy. Back then, you fought 3 fights because it was a tournament style, and you didn't know who you were going to face. There was no film of them, and you didn't know what style, because now MMA has become its own style. Back then, if you were a wrestler, you could face a boxer, you could face a sumo wrestler, you could face a long style karate. And hell, Dan faced in the first round a Muay Thai guy, and then in the second round a long style karate, and then the third round he faced Hoist Gracie, who had Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So each guy had a completely different style, strategy. There was no way to prepare for it. We didn't know what we were training for. Compared to now, these guys have it's down to a science. But we pulled it off, and you know, Dan went on to become a Hall of Famer in the UFC.
Never wanted to give it a hand yourself. Never thought about getting in the octagon back then.
No, I never really did because quite honestly, I enjoyed professional wrestling too much, and a lot of it, it's just my view, but a lot of the those guys, some of them they were former successful athletes in other whatever their sport was, and it was a way for them to continue to compete and to prove that they were the best. And I didn't have that desire in me. I wanted to be a professional wrestler, and it was you know that's what I enjoyed. I enjoy the different aspects of training with Dan, and because every style of fighting has its own unique timing, distance, footwork, approach, etc. And you know, not only trying to teach, train for that, but also when you're watching some of those fighters and being able to, you know, uh, figure it out and determine what works best as far as an offense and a defense against it. That was fun, but to personally for me to get in the ring, in the octagon and do it, I never really had much of an interest.
Do I remember correctly? Did Hoist Gracie break Dan's arm that night?
No, he did not break Dan's arm. He got him in a triangle, using his legs and got him in a triangle choke and um, choked him out to make him submit.
What was UFC money like back then? Do you know? What did the winner that night? What did Hoist Gracie walk away with? Do you
Um,
remember?
I I can't. It's nowhere near what it is now.
Of course
I
not.
can tell you that. Um, but I can't. I don't remember what Dan got. And it would not be for me to say,
No,
anyways, even
no.
if I did. But Dan did well. He did all right, but nothing like what those guys get now. No,
Now, is it based on? I mean, if you get knocked out in the first round, is that how the
you're
person get?
done.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You get the loser's share of the purse of the first round, which is not nearly as much as the loser's share of the purse in the second round, or the loser's share of the purse in the third round.
So Dan Severn, you guys start working on that wrestling, then you start training for UFC. He goes out there, he makes it all the way to the finals in his first big UFC appearance, and something magical happened for Al Snow's career that night. Correct?
Yeah, I had known Cornette for years, and both through the Indies and working for WCW whenever they would do tours of Ohio and Michigan and Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Indiana, Northern Kentucky, and Jimmy never had an interest when he opened up Smoky Mountain because I never had a demonstrative personality that he could see, and he was at home watching. I'd worked in Ashland, Kentucky, which was a northeastern town for Bobby Blaze, and Bobby used a lot of Smoky Mountains guys, and they went and basically recommended me to Cornette, but again, I didn't have a personality, nothing to convince him to use me, and I was there with Dan at the UFC, and we had just Dan had just won the second round, and the interviewer, I could tell like he's trying to get Dan to say something that put over Hoist Gracie, and Dan's kind of fumbling for words, and to me it seemed like it went on forever. But when I watch it back now, I realize it didn't. And I just spoke. He's like, "Well, Dan, what are you going to do now? To prepare for Hoist Gracie?" And I just thought it was such a I don't know why it just struck me as like such. Oh, come on now. What do you think he's going to do? So I just stepped up and I said, "What do you think he's going to do? He's going back to the locker room and have sex." So the interviewer immediately snatched the mic from away. And of course, Cornette thought it was awesome that I was such a smartass. And then it showed that I had a personality. And as a result, when Eddie Gilbert left the territory, He was going to have Eddie team with Glenn Jacobs as Unabomb, who's Kane. He left the territory and went to Puerto Rico to be the booker. Jimmy contacted me and now wanted to use me because he saw the personality that I had.
And the rest is history, and we're going to get into all of that at some point as well. But I just always find it so funny because I've heard Cornette tell the story exactly the way that you just told it, that he saw you on there and he laughed and he couldn't believe that you went on your way to do that, and you were the perfect mouthpiece to team up with Glenn. And like I said, the rest is history. You guys had an awesome run there that we're going to talk about at some point. So, and then one of the other things, Al, before we head out here, and we've already talked about it a little bit, is again, guys, I want to remind all of our listeners, we've got the contest running right now on our Facebook page at Inside Al Snow's Head. All you guys have to do is stop over at collarandelbowbrand.com, pick out your favorite t-shirt, take a screenshot of that t-shirt, hop over on that Facebook page, drop that screenshot in the comments, and tag a friend that you think is going to like the show or who may just like a collar and elbow t-shirt themselves. And once we get that Facebook page to 800 likes, we're going to pick out 2 lucky winners, and they're going to receive that collar and elbow shirt that they picked out and shared in there. And I know we've talked about the military shirt, and each week I ask you to talk about a new shirt. Al, what's a fun shirt over at collarandelbowbrand.com that our listeners should check out?
The support your local wrestler. That's really a popular shirt. Everybody loves it. I love it. In fact, I got it on right now, and nothing says it better than support your local wrestler.
What is the most popular selling shirt at collarandelbowbrand.com?
I don't know the recent numbers. I know that I know support your local wrestler has always been very popular. I think the pro wrestling is not a crime is pretty high up there right now as far as sales. And I think the military, the green military with the flag on the back, is doing very well as well.
Guys, I just can't say enough about these shirts over at collarandelbowbrand.com. And in fact, for our listeners, Al, you've got a special code that they can use to even save more, correct?
Yes, I do. You can use the code Snowman, and it'll take 10% off of your purchase. You can save 10% by using the code Snowman.
And that even applies to some of the shirts that are already on sale right now
Yes.
at collarandelbowbrand.com. So, Al, at the end of every show, I ask you what you've got going on for this week coming up. Are you doing any traveling, or is this just going to be an OVW grind out week?
I'll be doing TV tomorrow for OVW. I encourage everybody to watch the television, and you can see it at our website, obwrestling.com. You can catch it on YouTube. And then on Friday, I'll be going to Seneca, South Carolina, to go down there for a big show. I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Do you know who you're working with yet?
I think I'm going to be wrestling the Barbarian, which is, man, that's going to be really cool. I was such a big fan of the Barbarian, and I remember a time when we were in Cincinnati at Cincinnati Gardens, and there was an argument started between he and Tully Blanchard. Tully Blanchard, Barbarian made some comment, and Tully got fired up. And this was back when Barbarian was like Barbarian. You know what I mean? Just was a monster. And and he's ridiculously tough. I mean, he's a badass. But the nicest, sweetest guy. But man, I don't think you'd ever want to, he's like, everybody talks about like Haku, Barbarian's just as bad. And, and here's Tully Blanchard, like bowing up and starting to cut promos on Barbarian. Barbarian's like coming close to snatching him up and threatens him. And I distinctly remember Tully going, well, I'll go get my gun. And I'm thinking, brother, you got to get out of here and go get it. And I'm not thinking you're going to be going too far if he makes the decision to put a stop to things.
Always a Barbarian fan.
Yeah, it's too bad you left your gun in the car. You probably would have been smarter having it in your pocket. Because if you ain't got it in your pocket, you ain't going to make it to your car.
Does you a lot of good out in the car. We got Ohio Valley Wrestling, like you said, going on every week, guys. Check it out at ovwrestling.com. Follow them on Twitter and on Facebook, Ohio Valley Wrestling. Shout out to Ohio Valley's number one fan, Alan, who sends me messages telling me how much he's enjoying the product. So, Alan, thank you for listening, and thank you for checking out
Thank you.
OVW. Yeah, man, and keep spreading the word, guys. Share the show with a friend. Al can be followed at The Real Al Snow. He is Facebook at Al Snow. Instagram is The Real Al Snow as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the show, you guys can follow us at Inside Al Snow's Head on Facebook and The Real Snow Show on Twitter. Guys, The Real Snow Show on Twitter, you can always shoot questions and comments there. Al had a lot of fun again today, finding a little bit about how Al Snow came up to become the Al Snow that he is. And I look forward to getting into some of the later and I guess maybe more memorable stuff for some of our listeners.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. It brings back a lot of great memories, and I love telling the old stories.
Absolutely. Now, when you get done with these podcasts, are you all fired up? You hop off, you go run through the house, you're all juiced up talking about the good old days?
No, not really. I'm a little too old now to do that anymore.
Yeah, I don't do that either. So, well, Al, again, I had an awesome time. I hope the listeners really enjoy this. Again, questions, comments, anything you want to know about, please feel free to reach out to us. Do us a favor, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's on YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, please make sure to hit that subscribe. And if you've enjoyed what you listened, do us a favor and give us that 5-star rating. It really means a lot to the show. And be sure to check out our sponsors, of course. Huge thank you to collarandelbowbrand.com and the folks over at eatsensiblemeals.com as well. Code SNOW for Eat Sensible Meals and Snowman at collarandelbow.com will save you guys a little extra just for being listeners of the show. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We look forward to next week. Again, make sure you like and share the show. Share it with any friends, anyone that you think might be a fan of this wrestling podcast, or just to hear Alan tell some of his stories. Make sure you get the word out for us a little bit.